Focus and Howard County Roots. My name's Tom Cole, and I'm self-quarantining here again in my basement and connected via Zoom to my co-host, Candace Reed. Candace, how are you today?
I'm good. I've had a busy couple of days, but still doing well. And I always have to be thankful when, I'm healthy and my kid is healthy and my family's healthy. And so I'll take the busyness. I was saying to someone earlier, Zoom meetings are very different than regular meetings, right? And in-person meetings. So when you have Zoom meetings, it's back to back to back to back. So you're literally going from one meeting to the next. In person, you at least have time to walk to the next place or drive to the next place. So
listen to podcasts while you're driving.
A real adjustment. Listen to podcasts while you're driving, listen to some good music. So it's an adjustment. But yes. I am really thrilled to welcome our guest, Dan Porterfield, to the show. Dan is a Baltimore native who attended Loyola Blakefield. You have to say that for the Baltimore people who attended Loyola. He's an education expert, a thought leader, and is the first Rhodes Scholar that we've had on the show.
All right. I mean, I didn't tell Dan
for hosting me.
I didn't tell Dan until right now, but Dan, I went to Calvert Hall, so now you know, and so I promise not to take it out against you. And
nothing wrong with that.
But yeah,
I can add to that conversation. I can add to that conversation real quick. For 2 years, I went to Notre Dame Prep, so we have all of that covered.
All that covered. Nice to meet you both.
Well, we're really excited about this. This yet again was a very kind recommendation and connection made by former Secretary of Education John B. King. So obviously excited about this show. And as we have the last couple of shows, I just need to do another reminder to our guests. We're now on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, actually getting great reception over there. A lot of people were interested in our interview with Superintendent Martirano now that schools are closed for the remainder of the year. So click on over, subscribe, and you'll get regular updates there. And also, as I said before, we're going to have some shows that are only available on YouTube. So that'll be as we proceed. So do that, subscribe to our newsletter, both of which you can connect with through our Facebook page. But as we always do, Candace, want to do our three things?
Yes,
Candace?
Let's do it.
All right, you still there?
I'll kick it off.
You kick it off? All right, good.
Yes, I am still. Yes, I think you're breaking up just a little bit.
Yeah, you're breaking up for me too.
Okay.
We'll deal with it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, so schools are closed for the year, as you mentioned, and it was yesterday that the governor, along with the state superintendent, announced that was the case. I think people knew this was coming, but this was the official close and end to the school year. And at that time, they also released Maryland Together, Maryland's recovery plan for education. And so it looks at what will happen in the fall. But I didn't see any mention yet of what's going to happen this summer and sort of how we're going to continue to work on the obvious gap that will continue to grow, given some of the challenges with closing schools to coronavirus. But when you look at the plan, some of the things that are proposed that have to happen in the fall in order to go back to in-person school, it's daunting. I mean, temperature checks and figuring out how to distance in classrooms, and how do you teach kindergartners? You're about to have a kindergartner. How do you teach kindergartners how to distance, and why hugs aren't appropriate anymore, right? And so I applaud the Maryland State Superintendent for working on a plan and putting a plan together so that we can start to look at what fall may look like for students. But it's a daunting task and a real challenge.
Yeah, it's very sad. I know you have been spending a lot of time thinking about our graduating seniors, as have I, and just for so suddenly to have essentially graduated as it relates to spending time with your fellow classmates. I mean, you still have to finish your assignments, finish the year. But yeah, I think often, obviously, about how kindergartners are going to start school. What is that first day of school going to look like? And having, similarly, my daughter now not having preschool. I mean, her preschool is done because this is done. And so I always try to look for something positive. And in this instance, the positive thing I'm looking for is that it is making us all and some of our most I guess, static systems more agile and more comfortable with change, and making us all as human beings more comfortable with change. Because if you were going to tell me a year ago that my daughter's entry into kindergarten was going to be in the midst of all this uncertainty, I would be very scared and discomforted. But now, having gone through 2 months of this strangeness, this strange world that we're living in right now, I'm just like, okay, like, let's do it. Let's figure it out. And it's not going to be how I imagined it was going to be. And people always say that enjoyment and fear is the difference between expectation and reality. And yes, that is what we are experiencing. There is a deficiency, or it's a deficiency between expectation and reality. But we are going to become accustomed to it. We're going to get used to it, and we're going to thrive in it because we're going to get used to this. And so the biggest thing, as we've talked about often on the show, is taking care of the kids that do not have the same type of support structure, the same type of education at home, the same type of technology at home, making sure they're okay, because otherwise we are creating a bad society of haves and have-nots. But we have talked about that at length. And if those that are interested in about that, I would highly recommend our interview with Dr. King, as well as our interview with Dr. Martirano. What else are we thinking about?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, just one more comment on that is that if we look at the opportunity, and we always like to do that on the show, and look at the solution, this COVID-19 crisis provides an opportunity for us to do something different for those in our community who need it. If we look at the disparities, whether it be in education or health or housing, as we often talk about on the show, this provides an opportunity for us to do something different. We cannot go back to what was considered normal. And so I just wanted to point that out. What else are you thinking about?
So I am thinking about the governor's executive order yesterday, opening up parks, campgrounds, recreational facilities, golf courses, and then the subsequent local orders in places such as Howard County that are effectuating that. I wrote on Facebook, and I personally am abiding by that, is just because things are open, I think we all need to respect each other's decision as to how we are going to re-enter the world, how we are going to participate, because I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a point, and I don't think we're there yet, but there's going to be a point where peer pressure and social norms are going to start to form around this, and everybody has different levels of vulnerability, and everybody has different family members with different levels of vulnerability, and like different friends with different levels of vulnerability. And even though one person may be perfectly healthy, they need to understand that their decisions are going to have echoes in their entire social network. So I do not critique the governor for making this order. I was certainly scared by the number of people I saw lining up to cross the Bay Bridge today. And I think opening everything at once, I mean, my preference, and I said this to a friend last night, was that if we were going to reopen things, we would reopen those things that can be done on a ticketed basis, those things where we can count the number of people that are coming in to do the thing. But we're not, and this is what we have now. I keep saying to people that are disbelieving COVID or treating it as some sort of conspiracy, like, look to the science. And the science, in very many respects, says outdoor activities, so long as physical distancing is being maintained, is fine. We can have outdoor activities. As a matter of fact, in many of the beaches that they've opened, where they have required people to keep moving, you can't just set up your spot and like socialize there. It's been fine. So it's what I'm thinking about, and I hope that everyone, when they make their own decision about what they'll do for physical distancing, what they'll do for their activities, that they not only consider themselves, but they consider, 3 steps out, 9 degrees from Kevin Bacon. Like, think how big your network gets, and who you might be putting in danger based on what you do.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll add to that, because I think you said that very well, is that I was reading a New York Times article today at lunch, and there was a diagram there that was looking at the curves, right? We flattened it somewhat in some of the major cities that that went to sort of the shutdown immediately or earlier than others, and that's not the case in Maryland. And so it makes me a little bit nervous that we are opening up public spaces where we know folks aren't going to do what we need to do to distance, because it's human nature. It just, I mean, you're at a beach, and if there's large numbers of people at the beach, it makes it very difficult to distance yourself. And so it just makes me a bit nervous. I think, today in the Baltimore Sun, it said we had the second highest cases of coronavirus diagnosis that we've had since this has all happened. And so we're not there yet. And so it makes me a bit nervous to think that we're going to open up public spaces and human nature will take over and not allow folks to remember to distance. So I hope I'm wrong, but it makes me nervous.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, there's a little bit of signal and noise that I've yet to been able to distinguish, and that is, as we do more testing and testing is more available, we are going to have an increase in number of cases. And so we will never have a point in time to measure against, or at least not never. We're not going to have for quite some time a point in time to measure against and say, well, this is the point in which our cases started to go down, because we get more tests, we can test more people, we're going to have a higher number of positive tests. So it is the biggest thing we need to caution against, and we all should just be aware of, is don't look for certainty, don't look for obvious answers, don't look for no-brainers, because it's not there. It's not there on either side. It's not there on opening, it's not there on closing. I mean, I know that the smartest thing any one of us can do is stay home as much as possible. But I also know that the more we keep these restrictions on, the more we are creating just resistance, that we're just building up this anxiety, this angst, that is, if it does not get some kind of release, is going to end up blowing up the whole system. So, I think often, and as much as I groan at the Rosa Parks examples or Rosa Parks references that these right-wing nut jobs are making, one of the strategies of the civil rights movement was to have more people on the street than they had places in jail. And when I think about the quarantine and the stay-at-home orders, I'm always terrified of that, because there aren't enough spaces in jail if great numbers of people decide all at once that they're not going to follow these orders. So, I got myself down in a bad place, but that's sort of how I'm thinking about part of this. What do you think?
The last thing we're thinking about is the awful news out of Georgia, where we heard that a 25-year-old Black man who was simply jogging in his community was brutally murdered in the middle of the street. I have not been able to watch the video because I think it's incredibly difficult to continue to see footage of Black folks being killed for doing nothing except for being Black. And so his name is Ahmaud Arbery, and I think we should say that. And this is difficult for me to talk about, as a parent of a Black child. One of the conversations that I had early on when my daughter started driving was, the lesson of what you do when you get pulled over if you're driving while Black, right? And we're not anti-police by any stretch of the imagination on this show. And yet we know that sometimes there are police officers who have an extreme bias, and there's some racist police officers. And so that conversation that we have as Black parents with our Black kids about what to do when you're driving while Black has now become a conversation that I think we have to have with them about what you do when you're jogging while Black. I mean, it's just, I don't even have the words to articulate how awful this makes me feel. And I want to say this, I've seen a number of people standing up and saying this isn't right, and this continues to happen, and something needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, the bizarre, well, I guess we can't even say bizarre at this point, but the most, I guess, terrible part of this is that the two men that killed this young man, it was caught on video, and as far as I know, they still have not been charged. And
Correct.
and there is a universe of crimes that were committed in that short video clip that could be brought against these two men, and nothing has been done. And actually, the seminal case on racial bias and the death penalty is not that African Americans are sentenced to death more often than whites. It is the race of your victim is most determinative as to whether or not you get the death penalty. So if a white person is the victim, you are exponentially more likely to receive the death penalty than if an African American is. And in this instance, we sort of see that almost in real time. And what I always sort of guard against in my own view of these things is to not get too far into the weeds of the incident, but more pull out and be like, what are the systemic things that still are not being fixed, that year after year after year, these stories, I mean, even in the midst of quarantining, where we're all supposed to be staying home, we still have an incident such as this. And it can't just be, well, some people are racist and we can't fix that. There needs to be a larger conversation, and there's a lot of great people in this world that are having that larger conversation. But when you and I were talking about what we were going to put on the show today, we did not want to let this show pass without commenting on that, because it is a bit of, we cannot let these events go unrecognized, unaddressed, as many as there may be.
Right. So I'm glad we were able to address that. And with that, I'd like to officially welcome our guest to the show. Dan Porterfield is president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. Previously, Dan served for 7 years as the president of Franklin and Marshall College. He has been recognized as a visionary leader and advocate for expanding educational opportunity and improving the human condition, and was named a White House Champion of Change in 2016. Prior to his appointment at Franklin and Marshall College, Dan served as Senior Vice President for Strategic Development and an English professor at his alma mater, which is also your alma mater and my alma mater, Georgetown University. And for 4 years, as a Senior Public Affairs official in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. He earned BA degrees from Georgetown and Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, as we mentioned, and his PhD from the City University of New York Graduate Center, where he was awarded a Mellon Fellowship in the Humanities. Welcome to the show, Dan. We're so glad you're here with us.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Tom. Great to be here.
Good.
Go Hoyas.
Yes, go Hoyas, Hoya Saxa. We often start our shows by asking our guests to tell their story. It's becoming my new favorite question because the answers that we get often get a glimpse into our guests' lives, what they're passionate about, and generally give our listeners an idea as to why they chose public service as a career. So please tell us the Dan Porterfield story.
Oh, thank you. I guess my story is the story of being a kid who was born and raised in Baltimore. We lived in a neighborhood when I was a child in the 60s, where we were one of very few white families, predominantly African American, and my dad was a playwright. He became a public school teacher, and my mom was at home. They divorced, and we moved maybe 8 blocks away to another neighborhood where all the families were white, 100%. And we were living in a row house in this area of Baltimore. My mom was a single mom. And some big things that happened to me during those early teenage years was, one, that I came to understand in a real way what racism is. Because when the first African-American family, actually African family, I remember right, moved into the neighborhood, there was a tremendous amount of resistance from, a lot of people that had bought those little row houses, and they were their first homes, and a tremendous amount of fear and discrimination. And then families started moving out, probably half the block left within 6 months. And my mom was a great person, and she went up and got to know his family. It was a doctor and his wife and 2 little children, and brought casseroles up and just got to know them, and taught me a lot about what does it mean to do the right thing, to make the right decision, to try to live well. So I saw racism up front. I saw structural racism, essentially, because the laws were discriminatory. But I also saw hope, because that neighborhood, after it integrated, was a good neighborhood to grow up in, and with African American and white kids playing football on the street and roller hockey together and Little League baseball, and it was a good experience. I also saw the incredible power of affordable public higher education, because my mom went to night school at Towson while teaching during the day at a girls' school in Baltimore named St. Francis. And my dad was teaching in the public schools. And they both went to Towson in their 30s to get their first degree. My mom, like many single women, once she got a taste of one degree, she wanted more. And so she got her BA in history in her 30s, then went to Maryland while also teaching the day and got her MA in history. Wow. And they said, well, you're good. And so in her 40s, she got her PhD in history. And her dissertation was a topic that many said wasn't history at the time. It was the stories of prostitutes in the American West. And it was history, and it was published, and then more books came after that, all about women on the frontier, women in prison, nuns, homemakers. She really helped to create a field. And that field came out of her lived experience, having grown up in foster care and then been a single mom with 2 kids. And without Towson and affordable education and teachers to encourage her aspiration, some aspects of American history wouldn't be known. And certainly I wouldn't have had the great life that I've had. So I look back and I have a tremendous amount of love for Baltimore and gratitude for all these different experiences that make me who I am. My brother is a filmmaker in Baltimore named Matthew Porterfield, who has made 4 independent films about Baltimore. You should get him on the show. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
That would be great.
One is called Hamilton. They all have been reviewed in the New Yorker. He teaches at Johns Hopkins. He's a brilliant young filmmaker. And the most recent of one is called I Used to Be Darker. And it's about somebody coming out of prison. Breaks down all the stereotypes about Baltimore and about the way you see, quote, realism in the media is not the realism that my brother depicts, which is loving and beautiful, but also doesn't shy away from hard truths. So anyway, I'm a Maryland kid, a Baltimore kid, and that's why I was so honored when I heard you were willing to let me come on the show tonight.
Well,
that's why we asked that question, by the way. That's exactly why we asked.
Candace loves that question. But I want to build off. I want to build off that a little bit. Baltimore, as we discussed with many of our guests, including those that are running for mayor right now, it's going through some struggles, and the violence for the most part was curtailed by the quarantine, but we still are having shootings in Baltimore, and prior to that, we were having record years of murders. But we also know, as you just described, the heart of Baltimore and how Baltimore, as many of our guests have said, Maryland only does as well as Baltimore does. If Baltimore succeeds, Maryland succeeds. So you at the Aspen Institute, which we're going to get into in a moment, you spend a lot of time in cultivating ideas and solutions. And not that I'm certainly not going to put you on the spot to solve the problems of Baltimore, but do you think about that often? And what's your sort of view on what's going on in Baltimore from afar?
Sure. I think that Baltimore is a great place with great people. That's why I thought it was so wrong when the President of the United States made those incredibly divisive and negative and stereotypical comments about Baltimore just last summer, I think it was. We have to defeat that kind of mindset through many different kinds of efforts and initiatives. One is investing in public education. A second is helping to create jobs. A third is promoting integrity and ethics in public service. A fourth is bringing people together across the supposed divides of whatever, neighborhood, ethnicity and race, income, professional background, sexual identity, whatever. But Baltimore is a great place. And people that are from Baltimore know that and believe that inside. And that's something that can't be taken away, no matter how many negative stereotypes others propagate. So my belief is that, we have to continue a movement forward of investing in our kids, investing in jobs, and bringing people together in Baltimore. And there's so many people doing that.
Yeah.
One person, for example, I'll just mention one person fast. There's a woman named Sarah Henninger who works with a program called Thread that we work with in Baltimore, that's doing great work surrounding kids with caring adults that become a posse for that child. It's just one program, but it speaks to the spirit of Baltimore to come together.
You're an educator, and as an educator, we have to get your thoughts on the strategies that school districts should be looking at and thinking about now to prepare to address the inevitable equity gap that will be happening as a result of schools closing and the coronavirus. And so can you give us your thoughts on that and what school districts should be looking at?
Well, I'm not smarter than anybody else, so these are gigantic problems because we don't know which problem to prepare for yet, and so we have to be agile. But I think that listening to parents and listening to teachers and listening to students is the key. It's great that, as I understand it, the CEO of the Baltimore schools, who I don't know personally, but CEO Santeliz has been lobbying for significant amount of money to go to Baltimore and other big city school systems on the next Coronavirus Relief Act, which is very important. But I think we need to be able to, one, support teachers working in both virtual space and back in the classrooms. Two, make sure there's testing available, lots of tests, incredible amount of tests, so that we can know that teachers and students will be safe together. That's a bigger problem than schools can address alone. Similarly, there also needs to be a way of doing contact tracing so that we can make sure people that are sick, we can track down who they've been around. The federal government's failed to do all that work, so it's not like even with a great governor working hard and other resources, Maryland can just take care of it, or Baltimore can just take care of it. But we'll need to be able to phase kids back into school in a way that gives them enough distance from one another that they won't maybe make each other sick by accident. And it's a myth that kids don't get this. And I think that we need to get the business community involved in helping to support families, keep jobs, because kids need their parents to have jobs, and to take it, just take it a week at a time. Baltimore showed incredible heart after the killing of Freddie Gray, when, yes, there was an eruption of anger and civil disruption, but there are also countless creative peacemakers. Like for instance, the Enoch Pratt Library, Carla Hayden led that, opening up and being available to families and kids throughout the days of that crisis. That spirit's going to be needed. More civic institutions opening their doors in more ways so that we can have safe environments where there is social distancing, but there's also supervision, care for kids, and an engagement with young people about what they're feeling right now. We may need to invest in longer school day and longer school year down the road in order to make up for some of the learning that's lost during this time. And that's very important, and we should sort of be ready to lobby for that.
So I want to make sure.
This is me just talking, though.
Go ahead.
This is me just talking, so I'm a little bit embarrassed even talking this way, because there's people that are doing this work every day in the schools right now, that they're the ones that should be really giving you their opinions on this.
But I think your point is really good. I was listening to John King was was part of this leadership series today at the Harvard School of Education, and he talked about it being more than just a school issue, right? Like, this is more, it has to go beyond. The way that we work on this challenge when we come out of this will require us to tap into resources beyond the school. And so your point about what happened after the Freddie Gray situation with the library and what Carla Hayden did, like, it's got to be more than just what the school can do to support the students and to make up for the gap that we're seeing.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this in the college context earlier this week because I was talking to a few people that work in higher ed that were really struggling. And it occurred to me that struggling because they don't know what they're going to be able to open. I think what's really needed there is like the next version of the GI Bill, which essentially created American higher education as we know it today in the 1940s after the war. And we're going to need something that big, $1 trillion investment in making sure that our colleges can provide the financial aid that students need and can phase students back into learning environments effectively. And you could say, well, that's too much money. Like, well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about our people, our children, our young adults, our citizens, our future participants in the economy. There's no choice but to triple down our investment in one another, in citizens and human beings, especially the young. And that's what we should be thinking about, is how do we invest in helping today's students and young people be able to thrive and lead tomorrow. That's more urgent than ever. And this is a great moment to make investments that will address the inequities that persist in our systems. And on the flip side, if we fail to do that, what we're really failing to do is to invest in a generation of young people that this country desperately needs to take their place and to help contribute to our society.
And I want to build off of that sort of danger. You did great things at Franklin and Marshall, and being the president of a university, you know about endowments and how important they are. I heard something scary the other day saying that the higher education across the board, if you do not have a substantial, hundreds of millions of dollars in an endowment, you might not make it through this. And that we are going to end up with a stratification of higher education where we're going to continue to have community colleges. We may very well continue to have most state universities, but sort of the middle of schools, whether they be private schools or the state schools that are not the primary university system, they may go away. So what do we do to protect and ensure that what has become sort of the ticket to the middle class in terms of higher education, that continues in any respect for the vast majority of our students?
We need to invest in all those colleges, universities, all the types you mentioned, from community college through big research universities, so they provide access to all qualified students to a quality education. That's going to cost money, absolutely. But guess what? These institutions are anchors in their community of stability. They're enormous employers. They have an incredible multiplier effect in terms of what they do for their local economy. And they educate the young, who they propel then into employment and better lives. Everything that colleges and universities do is needed by our society. That's along with public education for pre-college, where I would think our greatest investment is needed now and always. Now, also, in looking over, just getting ready for today, I looked both of you up on LinkedIn, and I saw that Tom went to Lycoming College in Pennsylvania, and Candace went to UMBC. So I know both of the presidents of those institutions, Ken Trachty and Freeman Hrabowski. And I know them personally. They are incredibly dedicated to their students, to providing a ladder of upward mobility for students. They see students as collections of talents and assets, not as just people sitting in a chair or people you can size up based on some equation. Each one of them as a leader has transformed their institutions by making them more accessible to low and moderate income students, and in the process has made them better schools for all students because they've done that. Both your alma maters are really famous for that. And those stories, don't get told enough in our society. And so you read the media and you hear about, political correctness, or you hear about expensive tuitions, or you hear about a crazy idea somebody has, but the real story is UMBC and Lycoming College propelling students into the lives they're ready to have and developing the greatness inside of them. And that's what we're gonna have to fight for that, while we also fight for funding and support for pre-college education in all its forms.
The alumni magazine is going to love this. They're going to be highlighting this video. I'll tell you that.
Well, they should. They should. I'm sure they are, because really what Kent has done in just the 6 or 7 years he's been president is to position the school for really long-term impact, because the alums of the next 60 years are going to be all these first-generation college goers that he recruited to the school.
Right.
Lycoming will be the Harvard of Pennsylvania, because those kids are going to strive and rise and make incredible impact.
Wow, I like that.
I could nerd out for like 5 hours on this conversation alone, particularly about UMBC, because as you both know, I also work there. But we're going to talk a little bit about your time as president at Franklin and Marshall. Under your leadership, Franklin and Marshall strengthened its academic excellence and competitiveness by tripling its percentage of incoming low-income students and more than doubling its percentage of domestic students of color. We are struck by this because you imply that the university benefits from increasing its diversity, and we love to hear that. Why was this an important goal for you, and what did you do to attract and support low-income students and students of color?
Okay, there's a lot to that question. And one thing I did early was I went and met with Freeman after I'd been appointed president, and told him about a couple of my early steps and asked for his help to give me advice, sort of guidance from all that he had done in his incredible career. But in short, I'll say 3 things. One, we really listened to the whole community. When I first started, we had a big set of listening sessions to hear what the aspirations of the school were. And in that listening process, what we heard again and again from faculty, alums, students was a desire for an even more deeply engaged student body. Kids that were going to lay it on the line and go for it and put their heart and soul into creating a great education for themselves and others. We heard that again and again. And that was the first thing. And the second thing was we built a financial aid budget that was robust by tripling it, so we could go out and recruit high-striving, low and moderate income kids who possessed exactly that drive and desire that the faculty and the alums had said they wanted to see in the student body. There is talent all over this country, in every community, in every zip code. There are kids that have earned opportunity and are hungering for it. And I'd like to say that I was out there competing to enroll those kids and fighting back, Ivy League schools and giant flagship institutions. But in fact, those kids aren't recruited by those schools. And so it was actually very easy to show up, including in Baltimore, at schools that were getting the job done for first-generation college goers and low-income kids, and to say, you've earned opportunity, apply here. We will give you a financial aid package that meets your full demonstrated need. And that was the second thing, was building an aid budget that was up to the job. The third thing was structuring a running conversation on campus all the time about who's here in the classroom. What are our backgrounds? What can we learn from one another? How do we make the next improvement in becoming an even more inclusive place? Rather than looking at it as, hey, this is here and you're on scholarship, be grateful. Or on the other hand, hey, we haven't figured out how to be inclusive, we apologize. We invited the students to partner with us. Let's do it together. Let's each week, each month, each year, make the place even better for students from the full American demographic. And I don't think it was everything was perfect success, but nothing was a failure, because we always were committed to getting better. And the last thing I'd say about it all was that the numbers backed us up. Our Pell Grant students, who we tripled in percentage, graduated at the same rate as students who were from upper income backgrounds. They're overrepresented for honors and winning prestigious fellowships. They're all working now. A huge number of those kids went into public service, which always happens. First-gen kids always want to give back. And so we really got results you can measure, as well as very good feelings about what it's all about.
I want to make sure that we talk about the Aspen Institute, because as I told my wife before this show, that my dream vacation would be to go to one of the Aspen Institute's programs. But our listeners, while many of them know about the Aspen Institute, maybe not all of them do. So first, I'd like you to just describe what is the Aspen Institute, and then two, obviously we need ideas now more than ever in the midst of COVID, and it really is going to be our collective ability to design solutions that gets us out of this. So what is the Aspen Institute doing in response to this crisis? And where can people find out more about that?
Okay, so the Aspen Institute is a nonprofit organization that is all about driving change towards a free, just, and equitable society. That's what we're all passionate about. We have 470 employees, and we have a lot of different ways that we drive change. One set of efforts is around identifying leaders who are in their 30s in many different fields, education, healthcare, entrepreneurship, and putting them on a pathway towards greater social impact through a set of programs that we run. Almost like a leadership college. And then we have about 30 programs that work in communities all around the country, urban, rural, identifying problems and trying to find solutions that people can opt into together. For example, one of our programs is on sport and society, and we help communities develop action plans to get more kids up and playing, to get parks cleaned up, to get schools offering phys ed, to get parents involved. We wrote a blueprint for Baltimore a few years ago that's been pretty successful. So we have a lot of different ways we work, though. That's one issue. We work on improving learning experiences for public school students. We work with community colleges to improve graduation rates and job placement. We work on strategies to help family-centered strategies to address poverty. In fact, we work with the Casey Foundation in Baltimore a lot on that. How to help children and their single parents ascend together. We have a big set of programs for out of work, out of school young people called Opportunity Youth, work in Baltimore on that. So that's the second way we work. Then a third way we work is that we convene people and get ideas into circulation that are from good sources, authentic, actionable, and hopefully things that many can buy in on. We host big convenings and festivals on all kinds of topics like inclusive economy or addressing climate change or breaking down barriers of difference by seeing one another and being open. So it's an organization. It's a real honor for me to work with all these colleagues. They're doing all this great work. They're all people serving type individuals. They're all trying to make their difference. And since the coronavirus hit, like everybody else, we had to take everything we do had to go into our homes. And we had to cancel all our summer convenings. So a lot to cope with. Yeah. But we challenged ourselves, what can we do that would be creative, that would help? And I think we're just a part of it. We're not on the front lines like people working in hospitals or delivering products to our homes or working in supermarkets or drugstores. But what we're trying to do is draw attention to the problems people are facing so that the policy solutions won't be oblivious to the real pain people are feeling in their households. And secondly, what we're doing is we've moved a lot of our convenings online. And so we now have a new virtual channel we created called Aspen Ideas Now that's surfacing ideas that can make a difference. And we're organizing convenings like one we're having tomorrow on collective impact. We're just doing them online as best we can. I feel as if this is one of those times when every organization has to take care of its people and really hold them close and listen to them and help them cope with the week after week challenges they face. At the same time, we also have to say, so what can we add to society right now? What can we do that will help? And for us, the answer to that question has been to host as many convenings as we can that draw attention to the plight of people in these circumstances.
I think that's great. I've got to ask one more education question because I know that some of what you brought from Franklin and Marshall has helped influence your work at Aspen. And so talk with us a little bit about the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program, the American Talent Initiative.
Oh yeah, thank you for asking about that, Candace. When I was at Franklin and Marshall, we got some notoriety for the move we made to triple the enrollment of Pell Grant students who then knocked it out of the park. And I was able to go to the foundation that Michael Bloomberg created and ask them if they would hold some workshops with school leaders and college leaders about whether it would be possible to do something
on a larger scale, more than just Franklin and Marshall. Lycoming College took part. And the Bloomberg Foundation funded the creation of a new initiative called the American Talent Initiative, through which any school that has a high graduation rate could join if it committed to increasing its low-income students. And the idea was we would, instead of competing against each other, we would compete together. Let's all see if collectively we can get 50,000 more Pell Grant students into our schools over a 10-year time frame. And 2 years into it, we're at 20,000. So we're making really good progress. 130 schools have signed up. Well, the funny thing here is that I was lucky to get this opportunity to help put it together. And in the process, I had to pick an organization to help carry it out. And we interviewed a bunch of different leaders, and we selected a guy named Josh Weiner, who leads the Aspen Institute's College Excellence Program, to run the American Talent Initiative. I had no idea I'd be working at the Aspen Institute a year later. But that was my introduction, was through this incredible work that Josh does. The other thing he does is he awards every year, his team, it's a big group, they award the Aspen Prize to the top performing community colleges in the country, and they select 25 people to take part in an academy for new presidents of community colleges to help them improve graduation rates and job placement. And we've really identified the community college as a critical lever to creating inclusive economic opportunity for low and moderate income people. We're really focused on that. It's fun to be in an organization that's trying to, help Harvard and Princeton increase their low income students, but also work with all these amazing community colleges to do their best work. Every single education institution, from preschool to the awarding of PhDs, has a major role to play in creating a great country, strong communities, and empowered individuals. And the Aspen Institute's about helping anybody that wants to do that.
That is great. And I know that we have a few listeners that are either working for Howard Community College or on the board there. Howard Community College is one of the top ranked community colleges in the country. So I would encourage them to reach out to the Aspen Institute if they are not already participating.
Well, we would love
you're doing great work.
Exactly. We would love that. And one of the things that's really valuable is you create these communities where the presidents or deans or faculty of a bunch of different schools can get together and share what's working and also talk candidly what's not. And just doing that, we call them creating practice networks, can really help lead to social change. I would be remiss if I didn't say that leadership of educational institutions, but everything else, really sets the tone. There, Freeman Hrabowski at UMBC is, I would argue, the greatest president of our generation of college presidents. I'm not even sure that's an argument. That may be like saying LeBron James is the best basketball player or Beyonce is the best singer.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, listeners, if you don't know about the work that Freeman Hrabowski has done over more than 20 years, investing in UMBC to help that school, its community, and the cause of underrepresented students, especially in the sciences and math, you need to learn about that. It's an incredible story. U.S. News and World Report doesn't know how to rank change makers. And so they don't know the same way we do what Freeman Hrabowski has done for students and for the state of Maryland and for our country.
Well, one of these days we're going to get him on the show, right, Candace?
We are going to get him on the show, yes.
I guess you have to, maybe you have to recuse Candace or something. But but if you did, I plead with you, let me come on and be a guest interviewer.
How about that? We'll do that. You and Tom could interview Freeman. Yeah, I might be too nervous or something. It'd be weird. It would be weird. So one last question before we get into our elevator questions and our fun questions, where our listeners get to know a little bit more about you personally. We're told you're working on a new book about mindset and access to a great education. Can you give us a preview?
Sure, thank you. What I did when I was president of Franklin and Marshall College, and also when I was professor at Georgetown, what really characterized the way I like to work was I spent a lot of time with students in all kinds of ways, teaching them informally, mentoring them, going to their performances and sporting events, having open office hours every Friday, just really trying to be really present to student experience. And out of that, I came to see over time that a lot of college students develop, in addition to tremendous skills and knowledge in college, they develop mindsets that inform how they think about life and what they go on and do. And those mindsets are maybe more deeply ingrained even than the factual knowledge that students get. And so this book looks at about 40 students up close and shares, with their permission, their college journey in order to show the readers how that experience of going away to school for 4 years and being in that meaning-rich campus environment with access to other learners and to engaged faculty creates an approach or a mindset to one's own living where you see yourself as either a lifelong learner, a creator, a teammate, a mentor, or a perpetual striver. And I think the categories I've got are good ones, these mindsets, and they're accurate. What's going to be incredible for readers is the stories. When they learn about people like Markira Jones from a segregated school in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, or Akbar Hussein, who came to America with his family from Saudi Arabia on September 10th, 2011, and got stranded walking around for a month before they found home. Wow. Or Sheldon Ruby, who came from a rural community in Pennsylvania where no one had ever gone to college, and how those 3 students went to Franklin and Marshall based on their own guts and drive and developed this mentality. They're going to climb the mountain. They're going to lead, and they're going to create knowledge, and they're going to make the world better. And now Akbar is a lawyer, and Markira is getting her PhD in educational psychology, and Sheldon's a diplomat in the State Department. Wow. And that's what education does. That's what it does. It gives young people the chance to invest themselves in their own lives so that they can create the trajectory, the meaning in life that they want, and then go to bed at night knowing that their society has supported their talent rather than turning its eyes away from them and not looking at them or seeing them or caring if they develop. And to me, education is essentially the essential moral gesture of a democracy, because that is how society tells to the young, we see you, we want you, we need you, and we believe in you. And I hope this book helps to tell those stories in a way that makes other people say, what are we doing not investing in education? Let's go. Time to do that in a real way.
I love that.
Wow.
And I think that that is a book that, even though I am not directly involved in the educational field, I will be very interested in reading. So
I'll find a way to mention the Loyola Calvert Hall football game on Thanksgiving Day, especially if I can cite a Loyola victory.
You're going to have to go back in history a little bit to get there. But
Touche.
Well, we are now going to go into our fun question, and we're going to kick it off with probably my favorite question, because I read so much, which is, what is the last book, movie, and music recommendation, so you need to hit all 3, you've made to a friend or family member?
Okay. So book is The Beekeepers of Aleppo, which just won the Aspen Literary Prize as the novel of the year that makes a social impact and educates people about a pressing social issue. And this book is written by a woman named Christy Lefteri, and it's all about refugees from Syria. Read that book. It's a novel, and it's gorgeous, powerful, hard to put down, but at the same time, hard to read. Hard to read, hard to put down. In terms of music, oh gosh, I'm mainstream. I get my recommendations from my kids, so I never really have much to offer. I guess when I want to look cool to my students, I always recommend the Gray album by DJ Danger Mouse, which is a fusion of the Beatles' White Album and Jay-Z's Black Album.
Okay.
And he mashed up the songs and set Jay-Z's lyrics on a different pace to the Beatles instrumental.
Yeah.
So, but I must confess, that's about 15 years old. And then if you didn't ask about movie or TV show, or maybe you did, but I think I'm constantly trying to get my children to watch shows with me. And so I've been able to get my oldest daughter, Lizzie, to sit with me and watch The Wire, which I'd seen before. And we're on season 4 now, which is the one about education. And season 4 of The Wire is really art. And then lastly, the last movie I got my 17-year-old to sit down last night and watch Inception with me.
Oh, cool.
Highly recommend that one.
Good. All right. What is the most unpopular, benign opinion you hold?
Well, I'm a Baltimore kid who's a Yankees fan.
Oh, oh my God.
Whoa.
Oh, that might get some comments.
Yes, it's not benign. I realize.
I mean, I guess it would be worse if it was a Steelers fan in Baltimore, but it's close.
I'm not sure. I think it's about the same.
I was there you two are too young. I was there when the Colts left in the middle of the night and went out to Indianapolis. That was brutal. That was so terrible. And so the Ravens, I'm a Ravens fan.
Good.
Good.
Phew. What podcast are you listening to?
There's an Aspen Institute one that we do that I listen to, but I don't do enough podcast listening. So now I'm going to listen to yours.
All right, good. That's a good answer.
I like Malcolm Gladwell, but I don't listen enough. I need to do more.
What is the best meal? We're making an assumption here, but what's the best meal in Maryland?
Well, come on. That's certainly crab cakes.
But do you have a place? Do you have a place?
Well, I haven't been. Yes, I have. My dad, who passed away last year, lived near Harford Road. There's a restaurant called Coco's.
Coco's. This third time Coco's gets a plug on the show.
Really? Okay, there you go. So that's where you should go. Go to Coco's.
And they're doing gangbusters takeout right now. I follow them on Facebook. So for those that are listening, if you want crab cakes, you can still get them during the quarantine.
I can't help but say this, but it was about a year ago at this time that my dad, whose name was Gordon Porterfield, passed away. He was a Baltimore City school teacher for about 40 years, playwright, and then he taught at Hopkins for in the teacher training program. So he's like 50 years of commitment to education. And you never really stop grieving when you lose a loved one. Comes and goes at different times. I wish he was alive today because he's a true Baltimorean. He would love to hear me talking about Baltimore today. But I also am glad he's not here for the coronavirus, I guess, because this is so hard on elderly people. It makes me feel so sad for those that don't have a lot of ability to get outside the house at all now, and must feel very lonely.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of builds into another question we've been asking folks during this time, which is that being at home so often, is there a hobby or activity that you've rediscovered now that you are just locked in your house?
Well, I guess I mostly am working, trying to help people and enjoying being with my family. But I used to work out and do the elliptical every day because I had trouble running. My back was getting tired. So now I'm back to running again and running slow, taking a little bit more every day, and it's working. So I guess I've rediscovered running.
All right.
Dan, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I've gotten from all kinds of people, so I don't know where I first got it, was to be true to yourself. I think that all of us have a set of values that we develop over time. And then you look in the mirror and say, am I living consistent with those values? And nobody gets a perfect grade when you ask yourself that. It's one of the things I learned from Jesuits was to ask that question. That said, if you can answer that question, yes, I have these values, I believe in them, and I'm trying to live them. Just like my mom lived her values when she brought casserole up the street when I was a little boy to a family that other people were throwing tomatoes against their house. She lived her values. Living her values influenced her son in enormous ways. And I think when we can say, yes, I'm living my values, that is what integrity is. It's having values and living them. And we do the best we can, all of us. But I think that's the best advice I've ever gotten was be true to yourself.
Well, that's a good build into our ultimate question that we end all of our shows with, which is that what do we all need to do to elevate Maryland?
To elevate Maryland.
Well, you can expand it to the country, to the world, but that is how we normally ask the question, and you can answer it however you see fit.
So I had this wonderful invitation that I received this year to take part in the Baltimore homecoming, which was supposed to be in the fall of 2020 and now has been rescheduled to 2021. And the idea of Baltimore homecoming is that people that have left Baltimore and gone on to live somewhere else are invited back to encourage others to come back, to remember that Baltimore is our home. It's where we learned core truths about life and built relationships that define us today. And that Baltimore's continued flourishing is should be important to us. I was really taken by that. And so I'm going to be on the organizing committee, or the chair, whatever the committee is called, for the Baltimore homecoming, which we're rescheduling for next spring. And it'll be a chance for a lot of people to see Baltimore in action and to hear about people that are making a difference, and to attract some employers, I hope, to come to Baltimore. And so I think that's what we could do to elevate Maryland, is find ways to ensure that we bring people back and showcase how much we have to offer.
It's beautiful.
Well, I don't want to speak for Candace, but if there's anything that we can do to help promote that, whether you want to do a virtual panel or something like that in the interim while you're building that up, let us know, because we try to do everything we can to bring the best of Baltimore to our audience. And so please count us on the team for that.
That's a great idea. There's Nate Lowenthal is the one that got me involved, and I'll definitely suggest that you are involved in that. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. You may know Wes Moore, who's a Baltimorean who wrote the book, The Other Wes Moore.
He's coming on the show in a couple weeks.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, yeah. He was involved in Baltimore homecoming 2 years ago. B, he's got a new book called 6 Days about what happened after Freddie Gray's killing, and I can't wait for you to hear about that. But third, I've known him since he was 20 years old, and I had the incredible pleasure of, I was probably 35 when I met him, and I helped him on an essay when he was in college, and so and I wrote all over the essay because I was an English professor. So and it was a good essay, but I wrote all over it. So then Wes has gone on to do great things in life, and he wrote one book, The Other Wes Moore, now a second book, and the second book he sent it to me, and he asked, "Hey, will you mind interviewing me about the book?" So I read the book and then I interviewed him, but I brought the copy to the interview, and I was interviewing him on stage, and his eyes got wide open. And I was like, "What's wrong?" He looked at the book, and I'd written all over his book, and he remembered how I wrote all over his essay. And he said, I'm having bad flashbacks now. So if you ask him about Porterfield, see what he says.
We will totally ask him about that. That is awesome.
Yeah, I think he's our next guest next week, right?
Is that next week? It's all running together. Yeah.
Oh, this is so good. He's one of the best people I know, and I can't wait to hear how that goes. I'm going to make sure I tune in for sure.
Please do, and we'll send it to you too, so you have it.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much for this. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And again, we appreciate John for connecting us. And this was an excellent interview. We are huge fans of Aspen Institute and huge fans of you. And thank you for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And of course, to John King, one of a kind. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.